this is then going to be the third part of the entire day. Um, and there we look at cooperation and data sharing. Um, from one point of view, we've already been doing that for quite a while. For instance, via BICS program we already use for over 25 years. But still there is a lot of other opportunities, and some of them have already been briefly touched upon. But now we go more into the nitty-gritty with someone I know already for quite some time, because I remember Roeland, and if maybe you can come up to the podium. Yeah, we did, I think it was already 20 years, 25 years ago, we organized a meeting between the Dutch and the German Minister of Transport on the Rhine.
1995.
Look at that. So we go back a long way, Roeland, and now you are going to tell us about EU projects, policy, and federated systems and those kind of things. So I'm pleased to give you the floor and to see what you will bring us. And
I think the police is going to get me now, but anyway.
Go ahead.
I hear so alarmed. Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I was asked to talk about data sharing, which is a sensitive issue. As a small introduction, I'm a policy associate who likes to be with both feet on the ground, which means that if I were to go to an exhibition like the DIWA workshop or the Platina 3 final event, you have to look at the pictures, but I also would like to turn them around and see what's behind it, one way or another. And that was actually a way of saying that a policy, which I'm more or less a policy associate by nature, doesn't make sense if it doesn't have the feet in the operational. And that is something which is actually the basis of my message, is that policy and operational framework should be hands in hands. And in my view, we have already far more achieved than it sometimes appears. So we don't always need to reinvent the wheel. Anyway, I'm talking from two perspectives, from the ministry point of view and from the federated point of view. I start with the ministerial view, which is the next slide. In 2017, I do it myself. Sorry, I was asked. Great, sorry. In 2017, I was sitting somewhere in Parliament, and my new minister was doing a kind of presentation on how she would like to operate in a European setting concerning the Estonian presidency of the European action. And there it was identified that we need a fifth freedom in Europe, and that it's the freedom of data. And of course, everybody is opposed against freedom of data, especially if you talk with the Ministry of the Interior, because they say, listen, we built for 200 years our democratic society, and now we're going to disrupt it by free data. So we are not going to do that, but we can still agree on digital by default, and it serves freedom of people and freedom of goods. In that discussion, the minister agreed with the politicians to develop a digital transport strategy, and one way or another was only one civil servant in the room, and that was me, and he had to write it. So the outcome is the policy which was issued in 2018, and I have to be honest, the policy was also a bit based on my frustration with Platina 1 and RIS and the inland navigation, where I've been listening to digitalization and the beauty of digitalization and the importance of following the lead of inland navigation. And if we were to follow what is happening in road transport and rail transport, that would not lead to any good trail, because inland navigation is the most sophisticated. So that was more or less for me a signal that it's all silo. And we have to break down that silo. What do we want? In the Netherlands, already for 30 years, is multimodal transport, seamless multimodal transport. That can be done by digitalization helps. If we have data that we can share or can exchange anyway, and we include, which is very important, the customs in our perspective, then we can make real miles. Paperless transport is the digital by default perspective. I recall Nick being very actively being subgroup 1 leader of the DTLF, and in his particular way also promoted the FT regulation, which actually came about. I don't know whether you're still happy with the outcome, but anyway, it keeps a lot of people unemployed. But it is very important to do so. Sometimes I have the idea that they now give another interpretation of the regulation than it's actually aimed for, but that's another issue. What we actually want as well, and that is very important, is a kind of e-government, a one government. So government officials work together, which sounds like great, because normally civil servants say that business has to work together. And then we leave it up to the business to show the good example. But actually, in my way, we should put the good example ourselves, which is not easy, but it really should enable administrative burdens to be reduced. It is very difficult to do, but why don't we challenge ourselves as civil servants? And from a data distribution perspective, which is the maritime single window concept, which is already supported by a piece of legislation, why not go to an extended maritime single window by having a single window approach based on a federated data sharing perspective in the different member states? And if we do that in that way, we actually could have a great force and operational skills combined with the companies that can support the idea. Another very important issue is language. If we don't speak one way or another the same language, and it doesn't need to be Esperanto, because that will lead to definitions what a word means, but if we have a harmonized data interoperability, where we are not going to compete between various standards, but we have a translator between the standards, and now talking about as a general policy person, I'm not going to in depth about the technology, then it would be very, very interesting. And of course, we like innovation, but we only like innovation if we have the basis in order. Okay, the bottlenecks is the language. We all give different interpretations. There's not really a lot of interconnectivity ongoing. We have fragmented legislation. If you talk with Europe, don't always blame the European Commission for not having good legislation. It's also relating to the national, and we can assist one another, because what I know from Europe, they're always willing to listen if you come up with a good argument and you do it in a concerted action. So not too much individual. And we have a distort level playing field, and that is the reasoning behind our fear of monopolies, technological platforms that are going to dominate the market. And if we don't unify, and I'm talking like a socialist, but sorry, but if we are not unifying with one another on how to set the rules, and another third party might take over the market, like Uber or Amazon, etc. And then we have a not so much fragmented market, but a monopolistic market done by a commercial party. What is the issue for our minister? Not a centralized system. If we do something decentralized, it should be organized in a federated way, which is distributed. And small and medium-sized companies need to have access to data, which calls digital savvy, digital ready, and that's not an easy thing to do, because we have done some investigations in the Netherlands, in Finland, etc., and there it appears that 60% of SME is not really thinking about data. Why? Possibly because the public environment is not suitable, or they don't know what to choose, or it always costs money, so they need a helping hand. But anyway, this is an open area to further discuss. Advantages from paper to data. Well, I made a whole list. I can read it aloud, but I don't know whether that is very important. But in my view, if we have a one-stop shop perspective from a government perspective, and we can further advocate the idea of multiple use of data, whereas we are not going to talk about message structures or translated documents in data, but data as such. If they really can be exchanged, we can win the world by doing that. And that is something which is in various projects very much the case, but that needs to be done in a perspective of multimodal, whereas barges, inland navigation, railway operators, they talk together and see how to do it. We have some ways of doing it. If we develop that kind of concept, Whereas from the Dutch perspective, we have three phases. We need to go to a paperless transport society. We focus from a public point of view only on the B2A, or the A to A, or the A to B, not on the B2B, because we think we are not going to tell business how to do data sharing if we don't do it ourselves in a proper way. So we are not trying to impose legal obligations for B2B data sharing. What we're imposing is that we need machine readability of the data between the public and the private. We want to go to a government platform that has to be organized in a decentralized way. You can call it an extended single window. For instance, in Spain, they advocate the idea. In the Netherlands, they are advocating the idea, but not really pursuing it yet. That means that the ports, airports, railway ports, whatever, are going to be constructive and share data amongst themselves in order to advocate and promote their work. And the third idea is the basic data infrastructure, which is called the BDI, whether the translation is very good, because the BDI means BDI, and that might be that we are surveying everything, but that should relate to what business is doing amongst themselves. But we advocated the idea that there will be a federated data sharing between companies, but we're not going to impose it. As we are public administration, we set the rules first to ourselves, and then we would like to promote it and say, this is the way how to do it, this is the way how we as government can do it, let's get it done. Anyway, this was the concept, this was approved by Parliament, this was approved by the minister, everybody liked it, we formulated a team around it, we even got a hell of a lot of money from the Growing Fund of the Netherlands by saying we have to really get it into force in an operational framework, get it done. Anyway, how to get it done? There I moved from the Netherlands to Europe, trying to lead a project which is called the Federated Project. I'm coordinator there. I have been suffering from the coordination of Via Donau when they were sharing the Platina 1. Well, Manfred and I had a very nice experience, but there I learned the trade and the tricks of the trade. So that was a very interesting learning experience. Thank you for that. What are we going to do? Like DIWA is going to do, is a master plan. And we want to develop a master plan on how to get this policy perspective in an operational framework in order to prevent constant discussions with new gadgets, new tools, just a framework. Please keep to the framework, and then we can go in and further implement data sharing in a trusted environment. First, the vision. The vision is that we need an infrastructure provision. It needs to be pool-based, so we're not going to require everybody to push the data, but we want to go into the system, of course, in a trusted environment. Therefore, we need arrangements, and therefore we need technical applications. And what is the outcome if everybody is connected? The outcome is that we can further develop digital services. What digital services? Well, you can think of it yourself, but therefore you first need to have the infrastructure provision. It's not up to the public to say what kind of services you're going to provide, but we know that if there is a sound basic infrastructure available and you could sell it might be a public facility, then it enables businesses to further develop business on it, and they will develop their own business cases. It creates for everybody supply chain visibility, which is very important, and it allows optimization of capacity and asset utilization. It needs all, and that is the idea, we need to scale it and we need to show that this vision can be put into a technical operational framework. What we're aiming at is actually a kind of Internet of Logistics, which is an interoperable grid of trusted nodes. So some people ask me, what is the difference between the Phoenix project and the Federated project? The Federated project aims at nodes, whereas every participant in the grid can autonomously function as a node. And that means that people that have reliable data or as a user are searching for reliable data can scan query, independent from predefined questions, the whole grid, the whole network, the whole space that is captured by the different parties participating in the federated grid. And therefore, we have some data availability. Of course, you have to find the data, so there needs to be distribution, discovery. You need an index, a service registry, read a golden book, golden guide. And everybody needs to facilitate that, and it needs to be trusted. So there needs to be ID and authorization. And then we need to further embrace that and get a kind of protocol stack with the set of arrangements in order to allow people to participate in the grid. So here you see it. This is the grid. Now, the operational framework. How can you become a grid? First, in order to have a functional grid, you need 4 requirements to be fulfilled. It needs to be secure. There needs to be a kind of common language, not Esperanto. It needs to be understandable towards each other. You need controlled access, and you need to be discovered. Otherwise, you cannot find any partner, or you don't know where to do business with. Within these functional requirements, I'm a lawyer. If I were an IT architect, that's different. What for me as a lawyer is functional is not functional for an IT specialist. An IT specialist thinks technical specifications are functional specifications, but okay. Now, for me, the technical specifications are, and that is what we have defined with many architects the last 3 years, and we have defined it also in our website, it's all available. We have developed semantics. How to do this harmonized interoperability. We have developed a federated semantic model that allows to identify data and to exchange data based on a same language concept. We need identification, authorization, and authentication. We need a service registry, so you need to know where to find the data and where to find the companies, and it needs an index. And most of it is based on semantics. So semantics actually is the roots of the federated approach, and that is very important for in future. And if you do that like this, you, based on the set of agreements, you can do business with one another. What are the operational conditions? And now I'm talking also as a public person. I think that the government should hold a kind of responsibility to put it in place. If we just ask a company to do it, that's not possible, because that's not the task of a company to take care of the whole world. That is why people pay taxes to us civil servants. And that is why we need a good interaction between the European Commission and the national governments on how to set up a regulatory framework to promote this idea. And of course, there needs to be a governance on how to govern these kind of technical specifications that need to be generally governed, and that needs to be specifically governed in the different member states. How does it work in the Netherlands? How does it work in Finland? Can we compare notes? These things have to be further developed. Here I give you some explanation how nodes interconnect and how that relates to the protocol stack, the set of agreements. So in the middle you see this kind of protocols that have to be further developed. It's also based on the concept of linked data. And here you see, for instance, that a project as Phoenix also fits in because they have already developed the protocol stack. So that's where we assemble the different projects in a total or overarching operational framework. I'm not going deeper into it. I can always take questions, and if I can't answer it, I give it to my colleagues of the IT department. Anyway, the federated node of interoperability, we will still serve you and the nations till the end of this year, and then our project comes to an end. We have some engines, which is the one record of IATA. We have the BDI concept, which I showed before, which is done in the Netherlands, on how to create a node incorporating the EII and the security and the service registry. And we try to make it work in order to enable companies that work with these engines, like the Simple engine in Spain. And Simple in Spain is an extended maritime single window, which will also serve in Spain in future as the FT engine. So they will facilitate the data sharing between the business and authorities in Spain. And this is a kind of common living lab we are developing at the moment together with all our members. And we have 15 partners running 23 living labs to validate the thing I just showed you. And in addition, we'll show that we are interoperable between ourselves. And it is going to be sent at our final event on the 30th of November. Anyway, now, there's a lot of talk about EU mobility spaces in such a term that not always everybody understands what it is. The mobility data, the data spaces promoted by the European Commission, DG Connect, are partly based on the concept of DTLF, which is also based on federated data sharing. And at the moment, there are many studies ongoing. Your DG Connect pays a hell of a lot of money in order to allow everybody to breathe on the idea. But here you see, for instance, EURIS is also part of the idea that we try to get to a perspective, in this case, for the mobility data spaces, to incorporate the various platforms like the EURIS in a kind of federated way. And that is not federated as the pink federated, but it's the distributed data sharing perspective. And that might end to one of my last slides, that if we further develop the data space and we're going to combine it, we have the EU and the national policies, which is sustainable smart mobility, DTLF, EU data spaces. We have the operational framework presented by federated. That doesn't want to mean that I promote federated as such, because it's assembly of many different ideas that we just put together. And in future, it might be that the execution of the operational framework will be done by the member states in coordination with their businesses. And of course, there needs to be interoperability between the member states. But in the end, and that is a bit of my original idea of being frustrated, I think we in Europe have established a hell of a lot of information. In the federated, we assembled that information, and we are in the process at the moment that we are not necessarily needing to reinvent the wheel anymore, but we have to get concerted action on how to go about it. Anyway, data sharing. You don't know where you go to. You're not guided. We provide some guidance, but we have to make the bridge better, and that is my offer to you. Thanks.
Well, maybe you could stay behind the podest for just a second more. This is very complicated stuff, you know. I have some difficulty sometimes understanding it. And you said like 60% of SMEs are not digital ready, or did I take that from the digital infrastructure logistics report?
No. In the Netherlands, like we have a project in the Netherlands running, which is the Digital Information Logistics Project, which is being, which is under development, and therefore we have allocated like 15 million euros to educate small and medium-sized enterprises on how to work with data. Because based on many investigations, and that doesn't only count for the Netherlands, it counts for whole Europe, that we constantly promote the need for digitalization, but for small companies, there's no value in putting efforts in it because they don't know what to choose. And they don't have a strategy, it's not integrated in their processes, and therefore we have to enhance the awareness.
Okay. How does that fit into federated?
Well, I think...
Or FT?
Well, we have to... FT is a different issue, but if we are developing and maturing an operational process, you always have to take into consideration provide a helping hand to the people that want to digitalize. How am I going to help them? Do I need to give them a tool or some middleware or something which helps them bridge this gap?
Now you said as a public person or a private person, I don't know which word you used, that you think this should probably be done, or the infrastructure, let's put it back to federated, from a government point of view. Could it be done in co-creation?
Of course you need to do it in co-creation, because in the end the public administration works based on taxes, and taxes are gained by people that earn money. So if there's no money to be earned, why do we develop it? No, it all needs to be done in collaboration.
You talked about taxes in the United States.
Not taxes. You mean
taxes.
We
Sorry.
as public servants are honored to serve the people because we get the money.
Fastest growing state in the United States.
I put it in a Rotterdam perspective. So to
anyway,
be so blunt.
Thank you very much, Roeland. Very enlightening, and I think this is one of the big issues the coming years. So again, thanks to Roeland.
You're welcome.